Well, hello everyone. My name is Justin Newquist. I'm the new director of California State's new emergency management agency. And today we're going to be going over the future of emergency management. Uh, you can see my face right now, but we're going to just go completely to the presentation and we're going to look at what the next 5 years is going to look like. And I do believe there's going to be a lot of big changes, not only in our industry, but uh, in a vast majority of industries, and I'll explain why I believe that in the next few slides. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So, how can you prepare as an agency to the big changes that are coming? One, it's having an open mindset. That is very important. Um, no matter what rank you are in an organization, you want to make sure that you're continually striving for excellence. The fire service is constantly changing, and there's new research coming out all the time. For example, and we'll talk about this a little more in depth, but UL is FSRI is doing studies right now on electric vehicle fires because that's our new biggest threat that we're having to deal with. Not only are they hard to extinguish, but they're extremely toxic. So, along with that, just natural disasters and normal everyday incidents that we run, we have to continually progress to be better as public safety agencies to meet the overwhelming number of calls that are continuing to occur. Uh, Big cities are constantly being inundated with more EMS calls, and that's going to require not only more resources but better education for the public so they don't abuse the 911 system. So let's continue with it. So I want to talk about why we are a team, and this is another overarching subject in this presentation that I want to keep touching on is a threefold cord is not quickly broken. And my background as a Christian, this is just a verse that stuck out that would help apply to teamwork in this area, in the area that we serve. Um, you know, we don't really use these types of ropes anymore for rope rescue, but we get the analogy, right? We work together, and when you have multiple ropes that are folded together like this, a threefold cord, even if one breaks, the other two are really going to be able to help. And that's really what the fire service is. It's people, certain people have certain strengths in areas. You may have a weakness, but their strengths will bolster your weakness, and you're able to get the job done. So, in the next 5 years, how are we going to continue to maintain effectiveness with an enormous amount of calls coming in? They're just progressing, right? I've come up with a few things that are going to help with effectiveness on the fire ground, but emergency management in general is, and this is another subject that I believe is going to keep coming up a lot is AI agents and AGI. I'm constantly listening to industry insiders on AI agents, which are essentially just large language models that are able to do a vast majority of work with limited input, and AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. These things are going to change the workforce in a number of ways, and they already have. A lot of companies have moved towards a um, AI agent answering service. Now, is it ready for prime time in regards to emergency operations? Maybe not yet, but will we start to see an integration uh, with that? I do believe so, and then also that information being effectively uh, transmitted to our CAD systems um, is going to be vital, and seconds count, especially on the fire ground, and especially what they're saying now with flashover. time for electric vehicle fires, which could be seconds. It does matter. Um, Another thing that I believe is going to occur in a more nationwide way is kind of what Chief Brunacini did in the um, Arizona area. If I remember this correctly, they had a boundary drop and they all had relatively the same SOPs, so they were able to respond into each other's areas to best provide the quickest and most effective and efficient services for the people that they serve. And all these different agencies um, had came together and said, for the good of the public, this is what we should do. And then better integration of resources sharing. Again, kind of the same thing as the same SOPs, but this is where we talk about teamwork. Is we can't be separated and subjugated. We need to actually utilize the ICS system and continue to streamline our operations. Because again, when we interfight about boundaries and whatnot, it's really the public that is affected in a negative way. What about specialized teams? How are we? What's the next 5 years going to look like for that? And a lot of these things either come down to AI or just technology in general. I do believe USAR, again, notification times and getting people on the road and whatnot, that does take time. And wherever we could cut down in the seconds, that's going to be important. That AI could definitely help. Swift water, it, there is autonomous, essentially drones that go underwater that could be used for search, and it could help and reduce the risk of putting a diver in the water. And it would be a lot easier to deploy this than getting a diver ready. Um, and then pre-deployment too, especially with these floods that just happened in Texas. It would be extremely beneficial to the people that uh, who live in these areas to have pre-deployment of Swiftwater teams. And then lastly, with hazmat, again, drone technology. We've seen the usage of it in Ukraine, and I really think that the fire service is kind of just starting to implement drones. But this is another area that drones could be used to not put people in harm's way, and again, a lot easier to set up. And another thing that is an issue is departments don't have enough tech and spec members. So getting people trained up on that and providing and finding funding for that would be vital in the next 5 years. And that's what these drones kind of look like. It's pretty interesting. So, what's the fire department's role in EMS during disasters? Most departments, whether they are transportation only or they just provide BLS services, but there is a private EMS ambulance there. They all have a role, especially in large scale disasters. The the EMS hospital systems and fire departments are going to be completely taxed. How can we make this easier? Again, technology is going to be a big factor in this. There's integrated task for dashboards. Excuse me. ESO, which is one of the companies that we have used in the past, has this where it integrates the patient information for fire, EMS, and the hospital. Another thing that we are seeing um, and this is because of insurance and the lack of payment, is possibly the less and less private EMS companies be, uh, being around and fire-based EMS becoming more prevalent. And we just continue to see departments go towards this model where they're um, either have medics on their engine or they have single role EMTs and medics on boxes. What is the partnership in private and public safety sectors look like? Now, this always can be tricky because you don't want to break the conflict of interest laws, which is an area that I discussed. But you want to make sure that when you have a natural disaster, right, where it's a wildfire or a flood or whatnot, you want to also have these private agencies. I'm sorry, yes, these private agencies ready to go. And for example, when Florida had some hurricanes, either last year or the year before, Governor DeSantis had already pre-staged a bunch of utility companies uh, to get power back on right after the storm had come through, and it was a lot easier for um, people who lived in Florida to come back from that instead of having to wait weeks or months. And if you see the exact opposite of something that happened in North Carolina, where people were trapped and without power and access to food and running water for again weeks and months, it's devastating. It really is. And then another thing that is important, being here in California, we need to talk to and work with our insurance agencies and show that the prevention efforts that we are doing with the, you know, um, prescribed burns and clearing of brush around houses, that this can lower the insurance rates for the people that live here in this state. So moving on to state and federal agencies, what is that going to look like? Really, the big thing right now is FEMA is kind of up in the air. How is that going to affect us? We really don't know, and that's where we as leaders in this agency or in public safety, we need to talk to our congressmen and women, reach out to the president, and figure out what's going on, because many departments depend on safer grants and AFGs to for all types of equipment and personnel, and we need to figure out if we need to find different sources of funding if those aren't available. What about wildland firefighting? Again, that is a big thing here in the state of California. I really do believe that um, having these boundary drops, same dispatch or closely tied dispatch, will help with getting resources on the road. For example, the Palisades fire, there was 50 Type 1 engines that were requested for that fire. And I remember because I was on duty and I saw that request come through. And there's no agency that can fulfill that request. So you got to really be on the spot about getting those requests out to all the surrounding counties. What's some emerging trends? Again, we don't have too much time to go through here, but mental health and physical health is definitely something that is important to look at. And one of the things, physical health wise, that I think is going to be huge for the fire service is saunas in every single fire station. There was a recent study that showed that using a sauna 4 to 7 times a week reduced cardiovascular events by 50%, which is huge. And that's a big killer of firefighters, along with cancer. What does training and professional development look like in the future? Well, important things is grassroots training. Right, I've been to most of these classes right here. We need to narrow the gap between textbooks and actual incident response that is taught to recruits. That is extremely important. We need to get rid of this. Like, there's a textbook way and then there's a real way. We need the way, right? And then lastly, I've spoken on this before, but they're testing, and they've done some testing on fire blankets and water